Let's go to the new ground where we're talking about how demented we are with Donald Trump. And I've got a story here about how ICE was... There are times where the House of Representatives apparently can step in, House Judiciary Committee, and ask for a review of certain cases. There was a Palestinian man named Amer Othman Adi, 57 years old. He has been living in the United States for nearly 40 years. The House Judiciary Committee requested that the Department of Homeland Security review his case, which would have allowed him to temporarily remain in the United States. However, ICE authorities deported him on Monday. That was yesterday. I should say 2 days ago. He was ripped from his 4 daughters, his wife, and the country that he's called home for 30 years, said Representative Tim Ryan from Ohio, who had been fighting his deportation. So here's the deal. He arrived in the United States 40 years ago. His wife and 3 daughters are all U.S. citizens. He had his green card revoked after authorities accused him of marriage fraud. I guess initially when he came into the country. He was never granted a day in court to fight the charge, despite his ex-wife signing an affidavit confirming that the marriage was indeed legitimate and claiming that authorities had pressured her to previously say the marriage had been fake. He and his current wife have been fighting the charge for years without success. He's been facing a deportation order since 2009. He was spared under Obama's administration thanks to a private bill passed in the House of Representatives. Trump did away with that provision, and in September, Othman Adi attended what he thought was a regular ICE check-in meeting. Instead, agents placed an ankle bracelet on him. He's been in this country for 40 years, paying taxes with no brushes with the law, shows up, has an ankle bracelet placed on him, and told that he had till January 7th to exit the country. He and his wife sold their house in Youngstown, Ohio, and purchased plane tickets to Amman, Jordan, where he is a citizen. Early this year, he was told that the deportation had been called off. When he showed up for another routine ICE meeting on January 16th, he was detained with zero explanation and placed in jail. On January 18th, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Border Security voted to request that DHS review his case, which would have placed a 6-month stay on the deportation. ICE ignored it. So, all right, it's with that backdrop. We know what ICE is doing, right? We know how they are actively terrorizing the immigrant community in this country. There is no possible argument to be made that deporting someone who is been in this country for 40 years, paying taxes, obeying the law, forced to sell his house with a citizen wife and citizen children, is in any way making us safer, diminishing the threat to us. There's just no practical reason to do it other than to terrorize the immigrant community. Period. End of story. So we know that's the reality of what's going on. Now what we're going to do, and we have this basis, and we know what's going on with immigration policy on the ground. Let's watch Donald Trump lie about what our immigration processes are in this country as a way to gin up anti-immigration fervor, not just anti-undocumented immigrant fervor, but anti-immigration fervor. And he does this, and he knows he needs to lie about it. Now, does he know, or does this Stephen Miller know? And they give it to him, and he lies. Here is the first clip of Donald Trump talking about the random green cards of the visa lottery system. You know, lottery, like you just buy a ticket, anybody can win. Good.
The third pillar ends the visa lottery, a program that randomly hands out green cards without any regard for skill, merit, or the safety of American people.
All right. So, without any regard for skill, merit, or the safety of American people, in order to be eligible for the lottery, applicants must demonstrate that they have a high school education or 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years in an occupation that requires at least 2 years of training or experience to perform. So, their merit is established.
Just anything.
They're obviously vetted as well. It's absurd. But now let's move on to what he calls chain migration, which is officially known as family reunification. Family reunification, not chain migration. Okay.
The fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration. Under the current broken system, a single immigrant can bring in virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives. Under our plan, we focus on the immediate family by limiting sponsorships to spouses and minor children. This vital reform is necessary not just for our economy, but for our security and for the future of America. In recent weeks, 2 terrorist attacks in New York were made possible by the visa lottery and chain migration. In the age of terrorism, these programs present risks we can just no longer afford. It's time to reform.
Okay. So it is not the case that a single immigrant can bring in virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives. Green card holders can sponsor their spouses and young children for permanent residence right now. Legal citizens can petition residence for parents, siblings, and adult children. Period. End of story. In 2013, a study found that each new immigrant sponsors an average of not 22, as Trump claims, not unlimited, 3.45 family members. And in many instances, it gets a lot trickier too, right? Where you can bring in your mom, but you can't bring in your sibling, your 7-year-old sibling. So somebody, maybe the mom will wait. And then they get caught up and then they lose their place. It's absurd. But here's the point. Trump or whoever it is in the administration, it doesn't matter, know that they need to lie about this to gin up anti-immigrant fervor. This is the way they do it, right? They control the banking. They're sitting behind us with the knives and they stick us in the back. Whatever it is, whatever lie that they're doing, they're targeting immigrants. They're targeting immigrants with lies to gin up anti-immigrant fervor. And it is, it's certainly working amongst their base. I mean, remember even Doug? Remember Doug?
How could you forget? Of
the
course.
the Trump voter. Well, I think some people on the free show probably aren't familiar with him. This guy would call in and he would just say, "All I'm talking about is undocumented immigrants." And he called in the other day, and he now has a problem with just immigrants.
Always, he always had a problem with immigrants. Let's be real here.
Well, you know what? It's not even that he always or he didn't. The point is that when these people are authoritarians. So when Donald Trump decides that there's a problem with immigrants, they decide there's a problem with immigrants. If Donald Trump tomorrow said, I care about the deficit, they'd care about the deficit. He says, I don't care about the deficit, they would say, I don't care about the deficit. But the danger here is that you've got 25% of the population who are just waiting for a guy who knows that bigotry is his best friend, electorally speaking, to come out with another pronouncement, who has surrounded himself still with KKK, white supremacists, civic nationalists, whatever you want to call them. And so And these authoritarian followers are just waiting for their directives.
We need to shut down the fucking airports again. I'm serious. Like, remember right after the election?
Yep.
When the Muslim ban happened and everyone was very excited to do that? Well, it hasn't stopped. So we need to have rolling direct actions for the entire time that they're doing this.
I would love to see more interference of ICE.
I think there's no doubt that this is also really synchronized. Like, that whole frame that this was like an outlier. And remember when even during the primary, when like, the quote unquote mainstream Republicans, they've moved on and now they understand that we need to have some form of immigration reform and so on. But I think that like what's so clear is that not only are they accepting the base's desire and the sort of the xenophobia and authoritarian impulse, it's also just it's basic electoral strategy for them. Like, why would they want Texas to start looking like Colorado? It's like same reason they've gutted the Voting Rights Act. Like, they just don't want a broad society because it's not electorally advantageous. So for a lot of these, people, sure, it's racism, it's xenophobia, and then for a fair amount of them, it's just pure calculus, and it makes total sense.
The outcome is the same.
Exactly.